Hello and welcome back. So we had been discussing about the rebuttals of JCC Smart's article, Sensations and Brain Processes, and his responses. We continue with that. Now is the rebuttal 7. It is implied that the brain is not the source of sensations by the possibility that you may see yourself as a statue and still have experiences. Regarding an answer, Smart dismisses this, pointing out that just because something is imaginable, it does not mean it is real. Imagination does not demonstrate that sensations are non-physical. So with these rejections and responses, JCC Smart holds his ground that identity theory is true and mental states are identical to brain processes. We will now address some of the other key features, which is how is materialism, and let me tell you, identity theory is a version of materialism, is distinct from its antithesis, say, epiphenomenalism. Epiphenomenalism versus materialism. While epiphenomenalism argues that mental states exist but have no effect on the physical world, materialism holds that mental states are physical states within the brain. Smart criticizes epiphenomenalism for being overtly complex and uses the idea of simplicity and parity to demonstrate why materialism is a better theory. To support this, he talks about the Occam's razor. Ultimately, Smart concludes that no philosophical argument compels us to accept dualism and that materialism offers a more direct, empirically based account of feelings and awareness. It avoids the complexities of dualisms and nomological danglers. The best explanation for mental states is thus provided by brain operations. Now we will, in our second segment, talk about yet another theory of materialism, which is the functional theory. Functional theory was largely propounded by Putnam. So, to begin with, we would see how is the Putnamian materialism, the functionalist, distinct from the Smartian materialism, the identity theory. To start on, who is Hilary Putnam, or who is the founder of functionalism? Hilary Putnam, one of the most influential philosophers of the 20th century, made significant contributions to various fields of philosophy, including the philosophy of mind. In his groundbreaking paper, The Nature of Mental States, which was published in 1967, Putnam introduced the idea of functionalism, which has become a central theory in philosophy of mind. This paper challenged the dominant views of the time, such as the identity theory and behaviorism, offering a new way of understanding mental states that was more flexible and able to account for the complexity of mental processes. Here is a detailed explanation of the Putnam's nature of mental states. Putnam's paper begin by criticizing the identity theory, a popular view in the 1960s, which claimed that mental states are identical to physical states in the brain. According to identity theory, every mental state, such as feeling pain or having a belief, corresponds directly to a specific physical state in the brain, such as the firing of a particular neuron. Putnam raises several objections to this view. The first and the most significant is something which he addresses as multiple realizability. One of Putnam's key arguments is that mental states can be realized by different physical states in different organisms. For example, the mental state of pain might correspond to one kind of brain state in humans, another kind of brain state in animals, like octopuses, and potentially a completely different kind of physical state in machines or artificial intelligence. This multiple realizability suggests that mental states cannot be simply reduced to specific brain states because different physical systems can have the same mental state. Putnam raises several objections to this view. Further, he talks about species variability. Putnam points out that creatures with very different physical makeups, such as octopuses and humans, can still experience similar mental states like pain or hunger. If mental states were identical to specific brain states, this wouldn't be possible, as different species have different brain structures. Putnam also criticizes behaviorism, the view that mental states can be defined entirely by observable behavior. According to behaviorism, to be in pain, for instance, is simply to exhibit certain behaviors associated with pain, like wincing or crying out. There is no need in this view to refer to internal mental experiences or brain states to explain mental phenomena. Putnam argues that behaviorism is insufficient because internal states does matter. Putnam that mental states cannot be understood purely in terms of behavior because behavior alone does not capture the internal experiences of subjective qualities, often called as qualia, associated with mental states. For example, two people might exhibit the same pain-related behaviors, but their internal experiences of pain might differ significantly. Putnam argues that behaviorism is insufficient. Further, he gives the super Spartan thought experiment. To illustrate this point, Putnam offers a thought experiment about a society of super Spartans, people who feel pain but never show it through behavior. There is no wincing, no crying or grimacing. Despite their lack of pain behavior, they still experience pain internally. This demonstrates that mental states can exist independently of observable behavior, challenging behaviorism. In response to the limitations of both identity theory and behaviorism, Putnam introduces functionalism, which has since become one of the most influential theories in philosophy of mind. Mental states as functional states. Functionalism defines mental states not by their internal constitution, as in identity theory, or their external behavior, as in behaviorism, but by their functional role within a system. So, what is this functionalism? Functionalism is a new theory of mental states. A mental state, according to functionalism, is characterized by its causal relationships to sensory inputs, other mental states and behavioral outputs. For example, the mental state of pain is not defined by a specific brain state or by pain behavior, but by its function. It is caused by some kind of bodily damage input which leads to certain thoughts or desires, such as wanting to avoid further damage, and results in certain behaviors such as pulling your hand away from a hot stove. Analogy with computer programs. Putnam uses the analogy of a computer to explain functionalism. Just as a computer can be described in terms of its functional organization, how it processes inputs and produces outputs without a reference to the specific hardware it is running on, mental states can be described in terms of their functional role, regardless of the physical system realizing them. This analogy allows for mental states to be multiply realizable, meaning that the same mental state can be realized by different physical systems, brains, octopuses, artificial intelligences, and so on. The Turing machine functionalism. To further develop his functionalist view, Putnam introduces the idea of a Turing machine as a model for understanding mental states. Turing machines. A Turing machine is a theoretical device that processes inputs according to a set of rules and produces outputs. Putnam suggests that mental states can be understood in a similar way to the states of a Turing machine. Each mental state corresponds to a particular functional state in a system that processes information and generates behavior. The brain can be seen as a kind of biological computer that processes sensory inputs and generates appropriate outputs, thoughts, feelings, actions according to functional organization. States as relational. In a Turing machine, the importance of a state lies not in its physical properties but in its relations to other states. Similarly, in functionalism, the importance of mental state lies in its causal relationship to outputs, other mental states and outputs. For example, the mental state of being thirsty is caused by lack of water. Input might lead to a desire to drink, another mental state, and result in drinking water. Output. Putnam's functionalism has profound implications for philosophy of mind and related areas such as artificial intelligence, cognitive science, and metaphysics. Artificial intelligence and consciousness. Functionalism opens up the possibility that machines or artificial intelligence could have mental states if they are functionally equivalent to human minds. Since mental states are defined by their functional role rather than by their physical substrate, it is conceivable that a sufficiently advanced computer could have genuine mental states like beliefs, desires, or even consciousness. Mental causation. Functionalism also provides a solution to the problem of mental causation. If mental states are functional states, then they can play a causal role in the production of behavior. This allows for a robust account of how mental states can influence physical actions, avoiding the problem of epiphenomenalism, the view that mental states are causally inert. Compatibility with neuroscience. While functionalism rejects the strict identity of mental states with brain states, it is compatible with neuroscience. Functionalists can acknowledge that mental states are realized by brain states, but the emphasis is on the functional organization of the brain rather than on the specific neural processes. This allows for a more flexible and scientifically informed approach to understanding the mind. Despite its influence, functionalism has faced several criticisms, some of which Putnam himself acknowledged later in his career. Qualia and subjective experience. One major criticism of functionalism is that it struggles to account for the subjective, qualitative aspects of mental states known as qualia. For example, the experience of seeing the color red has a particular felt quality that seems difficult to explain in purely functional terms. Critics argue that functionalism fails to capture the first-person perspective of what it is like to have certain mental states. The China brain thought experiment. A well-known challenge to functionalism is the China brain thought experiment proposed by philosopher Ned Block. The idea is to imagine that the entire population of China, around 1 billion people, is organized to simulate the functioning of a human brain, with each person acting as a neuron and communicating with each other via radio signals. According to functionalism, if the functional organization is correct, this system would have mental states like a human mind. However, many people find it hard to believe that such a system could actually have conscious experiences or genuine mental states, despite being functionally equivalent to a brain. This suggests that something more than functional organization might be needed for consciousness. Inverted qualia, another thought experiment often used against functionalism, is the inverted qualia scenario, where two people could have functionally identical mental states but experience different subjective sensations. One sees red while the other sees green. Since functionalism focuses on functional roles and not on the subjective qualities of experience, it has difficulty explaining how such inversions of qualia are possible. Thus, Putnam's Nature of Mental States, which had introduced functionalism, a theory that defines mental states by their functional roles rather than their physical or behavioral properties. Functionalism allows for the multiple realizability of mental states and provides a framework for understanding the mind that is compatible with developments in artificial intelligence and cognitive science. However, it has been criticized for its difficulty in accounting for subjective experiences or qualia, raising ongoing debates in the philosophy of mind. Despite these challenges, functionalism remains a central theory in discussions of mental states and continues to influence both philosophical and scientific approaches to mind. Now we would see in what ways are these two theories of materialism, Smart's identity and Putnam's functionalism, are comparable. Smart and Putnam, as we have understood by now, have been two influential philosophers in philosophy of mind, and they hold distinct views on nature of mental states. Below, we can summarize the basic distinctions between Smart's identity theory and Putnam's functionalism. Smart's identity theory. The type identity theory, also called mind-brain identity theory, claims that mental states are identical to brain states. For Smart, every type of mental state, example pain, belief, desire, corresponds directly to a specific type of brain state. This view is rooted in materialism, the belief that only physical things exist, so mental states must be reducible to brain processes. Putnam's functionalism, on the other hand, asserts that mental states are defined by their functional roles rather than by their specific physical or biological substances that realizes them. Mental states are not identical to particular brain states, but are understood in terms of the relationship between inputs, which is sensory stimuli, internal mental processes, and outputs. Second, for Smart, there is a one-to-one correspondence between mental states and specific physical brain states. For example, the experience of pain is identical to a specific pattern of the neuronal activity in the brain. On the other hand, for Putnam, argues for multiple realizability. The idea that the same mental state, example pain, can be realized by different physical states across different organisms or systems. A human's experience of pain might be realized by one kind of brain state, while an octopus's pain or even a machine's pain might be realized by entirely different physical mechanisms. So, about multiple realizability, Smart rejects the same. According to Smart's identity theory, mental states are strictly tied to specific neural states in the human brain. This means that for each type of mental state, there is only one physical realization. Putnam, on the other hand, emphasizes multiple realizability. Putnam argues that mental states can be realized by different physical substrates in different beings or machines. This flexibility is a key feature of functionalism and allows for the possibility of non-human minds, example AI or alien minds, having mental states like humans without having the same physical structure. Further, Smart focuses on the reductive explanation of mental states where mental phenomena are reduced to and explained by brain processes. In this view, neuroscience will eventually provide a complete account of mental states by discovering the corresponding brain states, and thus Smart's identity theory is a reductionist approach. Putnam's functionalism is non-reductive, meaning that mental states cannot be fully explained by identifying corresponding physical states. Instead, understanding mental states involves understanding their functional role within a system of inputs, processes, and outputs. The physical realization is less important than the functional organization of the same. Smart's theory has had difficulty accounting for qualia, the subjective felt qualities with experience, what it feels like to see red or taste chocolate, because Smart reduces mental states to brain states. It is hard for his theory to explain why conscious experience feels the way it does. Although Putnam's functionalism also faces challenges with qualia, it avoids the strict reduction of mental states to brain states. His theory allows for the possibility that different organisms could have different kinds of subjective experience even if they have the same functional organization. Smart uses physicalist analogies likening mental states to phenomena in physics, that is, lightning being identical to electrical discharge, to argue that mental states are nothing more than physical processes. Putnam, on the other hand, employs thought experiments like multiple realizability and uses analogies from computer science to illustrate how mental states can be understood functionally independent of the specific physical systems that realize them. Under identity theory, AI cannot have genuine mental states unless its internal processes are identical to human brain processes. In other words, for Smart, it is unlikely that non-biological systems could have real mental states like humans. Putnam's functionalism allows for the possibility that sufficiently advanced artificial systems could have mental states if they perform the right functional rules. A machine that processes information in the same way as a human brain could theoretically have beliefs, desires, or even consciousness. So, J.J.C. Smart argues that mental states are identical to brain states, emphasizing a one-to-one correspondence between the mental and the physical, and rejecting the idea that mental states can be realized in different kinds of physical systems. There is no multiple realizability in the identity theory of materialism. Hilary Putnam offers a more flexible functionalist theory, proposing that mental states are defined by their functional roles, that is, what to do, what they do, rather than by their physical substrate, and supports the idea that mental states can be realized by different physical systems. Multiple realizability is there in the materialistic functional theory. This distinction between identity theory and functionalism represents a significant divide in philosophy of mind regarding how we understand the relationship between mental phenomena and physical processes. Despite their significant differences, Smart and Putnam, they do share some important similarities. Some of the major commonalities of both are: A. They share a basic commitment to materialism or physicalism, the view that mind is fundamentally a part of the physical world and the mental phenomena should be explainable in terms of physical processes. Smart advocates for type identity theory, which holds that mental states are identical to specific brain states. Putnam, although he rejects the strict identity between mental and brain states. His functionalism is also grounded in physicalism, as mental states are seen as functions of physical systems. Both the philosophers reject Cartesian dualism, the view that the mind and body are separate, non-physical substances. Smart argues that mental states are just brain processes, making dualism unnecessary. Putnam also rejects dualism, as functionalism assumes that mental states can be realized by physical processes without invoking a separate non-physical realm. Both Smart and Putnam are committed to naturalism, meaning that they believe the mind can be understood through the methods of science, particularly neuroscience and cognitive science. Smart suggests that as neuroscience advances, we will find exact brain states that correspond to mental states. Putnam, though functionalism allows for multiple realization, still believes that mental states arise from physical systems that can be studied scientifically. Both philosophers value empirical evidence and believe that the study of the mind should be informed by advances in the sciences, especially psychology, neuroscience, and computer science. Smart emphasizes that mental states can be identified with brain states as science uncovers more about brain processes. Putnam uses insights from computer science like Turing machines to model how mental states might be realized in different physical systems. Both Smart and Putnam critique behaviorism, the view that mental states are nothing more than behaviors or dispositions to behave in certain ways. Smart argues that mental states are brain states, not mere behaviors. Putnam, in his paper, The Nature of Mental States, criticizes behaviorisms for ignoring the internal states that mediate between inputs and outputs, suggesting that mental states are more than just observable behaviors. Both philosophers attempt to explain mental states in a way that respects their physical underpinnings, even if they do so in different ways. Smart seeks to reduce mental states to physical brain states. Putnam defines mental states by their functional roles in a system, which can still be explained in physical terms. Both Smart and Putnam sought to provide alternatives to dualism and behaviorism by advancing materialist explanations of the mind. Smart, through identity theory, he tried to show that mental processes are not separate from physical ones, but actually brain processes. Putnam, through functionalism, offered a way to understand the mind in terms of its functions within a system which can be described physically, even if they are not tied to one specific physical realization. Both Smart and Putnam have influenced the development of cognitive science and artificial intelligence through their theories. Smart's identity theory paved the way for understanding the mind-brain relationship in terms of neuroscience. Putnam's functionalism influenced the development of cognitive science models and ideas about AI, as it suggested that mental states could exist in machines as long as they fulfilled the appropriate functional roles. While their views on reductions differ, both philosophers are interested in explaining how mental phenomena relate to physical system. Smart attempts a strict reduction of mental states to brain states. Putnam, while not a reductionist in the strict sense, aims to explain mental states through their functional roles, which can still be described in functional terms. So, to conclude, although Smart and Putnam differ significantly in their specific theories, identity theory versus functionalism, they share many philosophical commitments, including a rejection of dualism, a materialist or physicalist worldview, a respect for scientific inquiry into the mind, and a rejection of behaviorism. Both see the mind as something that can be understood in terms of physical processes, even though they conceptualize the relationship between the mental and the physical in different ways. With this, we end our discussion about identity theory and functionalism of JJC Smart and Putnam. Thank you so much.